I remember my first ever notebook from first grade. It was one of those amazing black-lined notebooks, and it settled perfectly next to my pencil case inside of my fantastic Jansport bag. If only I knew how useless that notebook was. In this video, I'll go over the 8 biggest studying mistakes. Study methods I avoid at all costs. So the first thing is highlighting. So inside that fancy pencil case glowed the magical, fantastic yellow highlighter, a staple of any well-respected first grader. Bolded words stood no chance for Zach's amazing highlighting abilities. Textbooks, definitions, beware, right? Well, an important review article from 2013 looked at 10 studying methods and rated the studying methods as either high utility, medium utility, or low utility. And let's start with highlighting. On the basis of the available evidence, we rate highlighting as having low utility. In most situations that have been examined and with most participants, highlighting does little to boost performance. Okay, goodbye highlighter. Importantly for the rest of the video and the rest of the techniques I discuss, what this study did, right, is it compared the relative benefit and relative effectiveness of using these different study techniques. So highlighting might have benefited a few people, right, but in comparison to other study techniques, like for example, active recall and distributed practice, which is just spaced repetition, they stood really no chance. And they didn't rate highlighting as even moderate utility. They rated it as low utility. So avoid highlighting at all costs. Number 2 is underlining. Well, underlining is different, right? Instead of maybe me just wanting to see the pretty yellow highlight in my book, now I'm more of an adult. Now I'm just underlining the proper words and I've matured inside my brain, right? Wrong. Insert buzzer sound here. On the basis of available evidence, we rate highlighting and underlining as having low utility. So I want to talk about one more study that looked at underlining in particular. 2 groups of students were asked to read and understand a text in one study. One group was told to underline the text themselves, while the other group was given experimenter-generated underlining, so the underlining was done for them. And what they found is that there was no difference in the 2 groups. So comparing the people that did their own underlining and comparing the experimenter-generated underlining, there was no difference. So avoid underlining at all costs. So instead of highlighting and underlining, try something instead. Try to actually understand what you're reading as well as you possibly can. So take the time on the first pass, remember, because we're not going to pass through the material ever again. Go through the material on your first pass very carefully. If there's a word you don't understand, look it up. If there's a topic that's confusing to you, look up a third-party video. Because remember, we're not going to reread anything here. We're not going to highlight anything. We're not going to underline anything. We're just going to look at it for the first time and try to get the best understanding we possibly can. So number 3 is summarizing. And I know a lot of you will say, well, wait a second, isn't this the Feynman technique? Isn't that what summarizing is? Yes and no. Importantly, summarizing can be done, in my personal experience and what I've seen with other people, without any actual understanding of the information. For the Feynman technique, you need to have an understanding of the information because you're going to reformat an explanation that would make sense to like a 5-year-old, right? But with summarizing, you could just be writing only the certain words that you think are important. Or what I used to do is just writing the bolded words from lectures. That's not really going to help you learn better. Summarizing maybe can be helpful for people that are trained and adept at doing it, but most people are not. We rate summarization as low utility. It can be an effective learning strategy for learners who are already skilled at summarizing. However, many learners will require extensive training, which makes this strategy less feasible. Again, summarizing, just like highlighting and underlining, might be helpful to some, but compared to other study techniques, they are low utility. The next thing we're going to talk about is rereading. And this is a big one, right? Because I know classmates that still do this. I know other people that talk to me still do this. It's a tough one to cut out. And I remember I did this for a long time. In AP psychology class in high school, I used to think the only way to study for the test was to reread the chapter over and 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 over again. And this took so long. And what happened was eventually I was just flipping over the pages without my mind actually doing any work. I was just glazed over. The problem with rereading is it's time intensive and and passive learning. The relative disadvantage of rereading to other techniques is the largest strike against rereading, and it is the factor that weighted most heavily in our decision to assign it a rating of low utility. The initial reading of a chapter might be helpful, right? Because it's the first time you're seeing it and you're trying to understand what's going on, but anything beyond that isn't. Another study looked specifically at rereading, and they concluded basic research on human learning and memory has shown that practicing retrieval of information by testing the information has powerful effects on learning and long-term retention. Repeating reading, however, confers limited benefit beyond that gained from the initial reading of the material. And if you still don't believe me, go to PubMed or Google Scholar or something like that and just search effectiveness of rereading, and you'll see tons of articles that really don't talk too kindly about it. Rereading is a form of passive learning. Stop doing that and practice some form of active learning, and not only will your time spent studying go down, but your grades will improve. A fantastic way to use active recall is with flashcards. Flashcards are fantastic and one of my favorite ways to use active recall. You can use physical flashcards, or if you want to step it up another level, you can use an application called Anki, which just automates the flashcards to test yourself when you're most prone to forgetting that information, a topic called spaced repetition. So yeah, avoid passive recall, use active recall, and flashcards are a great place to start. The next thing is rewatching and re-listening. So why should re-listening and rewatching be any different from rereading? They're not. In one study, 102 pharmacy students were given a lecture, and they were told to study the lecture in two different ways. One was simply just rewatching the lecture, and the other was doing some form of active recall-based learning. Testing may be more efficient, i.e. cost-effective for long-term performance. Students who attend class may want to avoid rewatching course recordings in favor of practice testing. However, importantly, if you don't attend lectures in person, you should still watch the lecture once for the first time because you still want to get an understanding of that information. But anything beyond that first watch is a waste of time. And I didn't unfortunately see any actual evidence for re-listening to something, so this is a Zach hypothesis, but why should re-listening be any different from rewatching or rereading? In fact, I think it is probably the least beneficial out of those three because it seems the most passive learning out of all the three. Rereading seems kind of intense. You have to look at these things and read them. Rewatching, you have to look at something and you're also using your ear to listen to things. Just listening to things seems a very, very passive form of learning and might be one of the worst ones. Again, this is a Zach hypothesis. I don't know if it's true, but based on the results around rereading and rewatching, I think it's probably true. Watch or listen or read something once. Simply eliminating these things and switching to active recall will not only save you time, but it will also likely improve your grades. Big mistake number 6 I see is pulling all-nighters. Sleep, exercise, and proper diet are one of the most important things in keeping your brain in proper function. And sleep might be at the top of those three. If you have these things out of order, especially sleep, it's going to be very difficult to get the other parts of your life in order. Sleep is a magical force multiplier for everything you do, for the weights you can lift in the gym, for your happiness levels versus your depression levels, and of course for your test performance and your ability to study well. People who sleep and study less perform better than people who don't sleep and study more. Again, there's studies that show people who are studying more but sleeping less compared to those that study less and sleep more do worse. So the people that don't sleep do worse even though they're studying more. Once you go under 7 hours of sleep, your performance and health suffer. Don't pull all-nighters. The evidence doesn't back it, and actually an all-nighter we're more likely to lower your score than increase your score. So let's imagine we spend 12 hours overnight pulling an all-nighter studying. Well, that's 10 times worse spending 3 hours studying over 4 days. And here's 3 reasons why. Number 1, when you don't take breaks, your performance is worse. The evidence shows that. Number 2, when you sleep, you're solidifying and pruning your memories, so the studying you do actually sticks inside your head. The evidence shows that. And finally, number 3, when you don't sleep, you're hampering your performance so much. When you show up to a test with no sleep, studies show that it might be actually equivalent to showing up to a test drunk. So don't show up to your next test drunk. Instead, just get a good night's sleep. The seventh biggest mistake I see is having no plan. Abraham Lincoln famously said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 3 sharpening the axe." Now, I'm not suggesting sharpening your pencil for 4 hours. In fact, I can't remember the last time I actually saw one of those regular pencils, but I am suggesting you plan out your studying. A huge mistake I see is showing up to the library with a plan to study for a test. What does that mean? What chapters are you going to look at? What practice questions are you going to do? Is there a time limit on the amount of time you're going to spend studying certain sections before the test? Because you probably have a limited amount of time before the test. Not only will not having a plan make you more likely to procrastinate, but it also takes away precious brain power to actually figuring out what you're going to study. Be specific as possible when you're planning to study. Usually the day before, I like to plan what I'm going to study the next day, and that's at the latest, because then I can show up and say, okay, how many flashcards am I going to do? How many practice questions I'm going to do? What is the maximum amount of time I'm going to spend on chapter 1 or chapter 2 or chapter 3? And how long will I spend in the library overall?
How do I plan my studying days? Well, I would plan it like a regular work day. So you would work maybe from 8 to 5 on a normal day, right? So on a Saturday, that's how I would schedule my studying. I'd show up at 8 and study until 5 o'clock. And if during that time I had to cover 4 chapters, I would spend 2 hours on each chapter, leaving an hour for about a lunch break. Finally, I knew exactly how I would be studying these chapters. If this was the first time I was looking at these chapters, I would read through them very, very carefully for the first time and the only time. Slowly reading and understanding what was going on. But if for some reason I didn't understand what was going on, I would look up the word or check out a third-party resource to really make sure I understand the content after the first pass. But if this is material that I had already done my first pass on, that means I'm doing my second pass or doing lots of practice questions and lots of flashcards, because that is the best evidence-based techniques to score better on exams. So overall, what do? I show up to the library from a set time. I'm studying certain things in that set time, and in the set time that I'm studying those certain things, right, I know exactly how I'm going to be studying. If this is a first pass, I'm reading it very, very carefully. If it's a second pass, I'm doing practice questions and flashcards.
The eighth biggest mistake I see is taking no breaks. People who take breaks simply perform better cognitively. And luckily, when I was doing the research for this paper, a new meta-analysis actually just recently came out. And this is also in a highly respected journal. And this is what they said. They concluded, overall, the data support the role of micro breaks for well-being, while for performance, recovering from highly depleting tasks may need more than a 10-minute break. They also concluded that micro breaks positively impacted well-being by enhancing vigor and lowering fatigue, regardless of contextual factors. So what they're saying there is really breaks are good. And my favorite method of using breaks to study is the Pomodoro method, and I go over this in tons and tons of other videos, but at a very basic level, it's you're going to study for a certain amount of time and then take a break for a certain amount of time. I do 25 minutes of studying and then a 5-minute break, and then 25 minutes of studying, 5-minute break, 25 minutes of studying, 5-minute break, 25 minutes of studying, and then a 30-minute break. Now, one huge study mistake I wish I fixed sooner, especially in medical school, was not aligning my Q-Bank practice with my Anki reviews. I mean, if there were 2 things I was doing every single day because of the evidence-based impact on my grades, it was practice questions and Anki. It took so much time to find questions, and even if I did, I wasn't sure if they aligned with the flashcards I was doing. The Anki add-on from Amboss helped me a lot, but not with this specific problem. And now they just released something magical that I'll actually show you right over here. So say I did all my flashcards, but now I want to solidify that knowledge with practice questions, right? But what they've done is they've actually put this button right here. You see this button? Start Q-Bank session? It's magic. It's simply magic. And all you do is you click this button, it'll look at all the flashcards you have and then create a question set for you based on these flashcards. So what I would do is maybe just do 5 questions based on these flashcards, start Q-Bank session, and it'll just pop up right here, and bam, I'm doing questions right now only around those flashcards that I just did. And if you do this every day after you're done with your set of flashcards, the compounding knowledge you have, the knowledge that you're going to solidify your brain, the scores you're going to do on tests, I wish I had this. I really, really wish I had this. Anyway, thank you so much, Amboss, for sponsoring this video. Although I am a little mad at you because you didn't give this to me like in my first or second or third year of medical school. So, you made it to the end of this video. Overall, if you eliminate just 1 or 2 of these bad studying habits, you are well on your way to being a better student. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck studying, and I will see you on the next one. Yeah! I missed it. Okay, this one I'm gonna hit it.
You stupid little highlighter. Gee, okay, this is hard.